Okay, good afternoon, good evening. This is Sudhir Mishra show. This is a new avatar for me so far as entire career is concerned. I never thought that I'll be hosting a talk show, but my compulsion of doing it was that I believe that there are many leaders in the legal fraternity who are not only practicing, who are also teaching, who are also into under other domains, who need to come forward and share their ideas of success. And that was something which was bothering me for many years. And I was thinking that in every spectrum of economy, our country is seeing lot many thought leaders, lot many influencers, but in the legal fraternity, we were looking largely transactional. So in order to bring a big disruption in that whole thought process, Sudhir Mishra's show was born. The idea was to share the personal journey of few stalwarts in the legal domain. And they are not essentially lawyers. They can be professors, they can be scholars, they can be influencers in a different way, but who will also prepare India for the new destiny which we are looking at. So, with this background, I will welcome a very unique first guest of this show, who is somebody I'm extremely proud of. He was somebody I have been seeing his journey for last 25 years, and he is who is the kind of person for whom Richard Branson has said, if your dreams don't scare you, then they are too small. He actually lives that on a day-to-day basis. People who work with him, they say that he's like that Sunil Gavaskar in 1970, who is facing all the bouncers of Joel Garner and Andy Roberts, who were 6 feet or 6 feet 5 inches tall, and he has not got targets for months or years. He gives you targets for seconds and hours. He created India's best known private law school. He created India's first private respected university, which has a top 100 ranking in the world. I welcome Professor C. Rajkumar, founding Vice Chancellor, OP Jindal University.
Good evening to you, Sudhir.
What a pleasure, what an honor. I never thought 30 years back or 25 years back that one day we'll be meeting like this face to face. And I will say this, that you were one person, I was your classmate, I was fortunate to be a classmate. I learned it from Karan Johar's show that the first episode of Coffee with Karan, he shot with Kajol. And why he shot it? Because she was the actress in his first doctoral venture. Now, neither Karan Johar needed an introduction nor Kajol needed an introduction. Raj, the moment I thought of the show, you were the first person who came in my mind, that who will be coming and speaking about it. Because when I was there in the university almost 3 weeks back, I was thinking that even trees and shrubs in the university had a schedule to grow up. Even they were following a schedule. When people thought about it, that such a university can come up, which will be against all odds, when everybody was talking about, oh, this won't fly in India. You created this, but this you were doing for last, since your law school days, since your days in Oxford, since your days in Hong Kong University, and finally in Sonipat. I'll come to that journey, but before that, tell me your first day in Delhi.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Sudhir, and thank you to Business World and for hosting the show. First of all, I really appreciate the kind words that you said, and we have all been part of each other's journey. And I do believe that all of us were at a particular time in history when we came from different parts of India, and we were pretty much left to ourselves. In a way, when I look back at our own days in Delhi University, we were in many ways trying to figure out things for ourselves. We were not as spoiled at some levels as many young people of this generation. And that actually gave us an enormous sense of responsibility because we were dealing with uncertainty of a unique kind, where the future was so uncertain that we need to not only carve out our own destinies, but also to be able to convince that those destinies were actually meaningful and will be impactful. So my first day in Delhi was quite interesting. As you know, I'm originally from Kanyakumari and grew up in Chennai. And Hindi was not something that I was introduced to before. And I had taken the entrance examination and got admitted to the Campus Law Center, Faculty of Law, Delhi University. And I moved to, I was staying for a brief moment at the PG Men's Hostel in Delhi University, and I was slightly, having fever, and so I had to figure out myself what to do. And before that, I was at home, right? I mean, I never lived in a hostel all through my schooling and also undergraduate days. And I went to I asked somebody because I could not speak Hindi at all. I simply did not know how to speak Hindi, so I only knew English and Tamil. And then I landed up somehow to Kingsway Camp, and there was a medical shop there, and it was very crowded, and a lot of people were trying to get the attention of the person in the medical shop. And then I had by that time heard different voices of Hindi, over the last several years before, sometimes in movies or in other ways. So I kind of had this. I wanted to tell the medical shop person that I'm not well, and I wanted to say in Hindi. So I said, "मैं बेकार हूँ," and I wanted to say actually मैं बुकार हूँ, but I said मैं बेकार हूँ. Then I mentioned to him 2 or 3 times, and I raised my voice and said मैं बेकार हूँ, and somebody near there noticed my situation, and then this student brought me aside and asked me what's my problem, and then I explained to him I'm not well and I wanted a medicine, and I got the medicine. Now the student of course did not explain to me the problem, so he got the medicine for me, and then I returned back, and then of course I spoke to my friends about it, and they all had a hearty laughter, and that was my first day
At this
in
stage,
Delhi.
I have to ask you that you were from Loyola College, which was one of the Stephens College of Chennai, if this is the way I put it. When you came to Delhi, you had a larger plan. You had already planned your journey. Because see, our audience today is a very restless young population, which is hearing this debate, which is hearing this talk show. And for them, we are doing it. They want to be aspirational, they want hope, and which is the only thing we are missing in today's India. So, how did you plan it? Because somebody like me who used to spend a lot of time with you, my way of coming out of any despair or any kind of I would say that if I was in any kind of darkness, my only reaction was to come from Shakti Nagar, take a bus and come to your hostel, and 2 hours with you will change me completely. So today you are impacting a very large society, you are impacting a very large student population. The whole country knows that the best of the students come to OP Jindal University. I want to ask you, was the journey to Delhi intentional?
That's a great question, Sudhir, and I'll be very candid about this reflection because, honestly speaking, I was very conscious when I was growing up that I wanted to study law, although I was not sure about whether I should become a lawyer. And part of that and that's where I was very inspired by my own conversations, if you remember, because as a student of history, you would talk to me and many others about the freedom movement, but also the profound influence Gandhi and others had. So I was deeply inspired by the freedom movement itself and the fact that some of the leading figures of the Indian freedom movement happened to be lawyers. Mahatma Gandhi was a lawyer, Sardar Patel was a lawyer, Rajendra Prasad was a lawyer, Ambedkar was a lawyer, Nehru was a lawyer. So in some ways, the leading figures of the Indian freedom movement happened to be lawyers, and that was very inspiring for me and wanted to become a lawyer. But then I quickly realized once I came to Delhi that anybody who comes to Delhi should do at least three things. One, should sooner or later visit the Red Fort and see, the entire Lal Killa and its glory. Then they should also visit Rajghat and see where Mahatma Gandhi has been placed. And then, of course, should also take the UPSC Civil Services examination. So, like hundreds and thousands and millions of students, this was also told to me that that's a part of a baptism in Delhi University. But I must say that I was pretty half-hearted in that because I began to like law. So the moment I entered law faculty and campus law center, I simply loved the study of law. And I was hugely conflicted very early on that this is actually beginning to be my calling. And this whole idea of civil services, the only thing that was appealing to me for civil services is that I felt that one can make a contribution to the nation building effort. And that was the inspiration for many people who enter into civil services, that you can actually impact the development, the social, economic, and political development of India. And that was the interest in the idea of civil services. But very quickly, I realized that that's not where my calling is. And I began to deeply engross myself into the university life, and I began to love it. And mind it, Sudhir, you will know this, that when I came from Chennai and Loyola, which is a good institution, but it was largely a Tamil Nadu-based institution where students mostly came either from other parts of Tamil Nadu or at best a few states in South India. But Delhi was just extraordinary. For the first time, I got to meet with students from across India, not only from South and Central India, but also across all states of India, including Northeast. Probably the first students I met from Nagaland, Manipur, Sikkim, and of course Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. So that was like a kind of a melting pot.
Melting pot, yeah.
Absolutely.
I'll ask you something about your Delhi journey. I'll go deeper into it because Delhi fell in love with you, or you fell in love with Delhi. The fact is that these journeys are decided, they are pre-decided. Because a person coming from Tamil Nadu, because much of the South India, and before Family Man showed, when that guy asked in the Family Man, the OTT platform, that he said, South Indian kuch khana hai. So he said, which state in South India? He actually said, which state? There are 5 states in South India now. There were 4, now there are 5. Yes. You were one of the first person who made a distinction that you are from Tamil Nadu. It's not South India.
Yes. Yes.
And and Delhi had that uniqueness that it gave you that opportunity where you could really influence a larger audience. As a country which was already new, which is still being created, it is still shaping up, you gave that idea. Tell me, who are the teachers of your campus law center who inspired you? And as a 23-year-old person, and a lot of 20, 22, 23-year-old would be in your university and rest of the country who are watching this, they would like to know that what is the role of a good teacher in your life? And where do you find them in campus law center?
Thank you, Sudhir. Well, I must say on the question of North India and South India, I was, of course, quite struck by the terminology that was so prominent, widely used, slightly less today, the idea of Madrasi. And like many people from South India, I was also called Madrasi. And I made it a point to educate my friends from across India that there were 4 states of India. They do speak different languages, and I would not even understand the other languages in South India. And that I must say that changed a lot. Now, of course, what the point about who inspired me, I must say that Delhi University law faculty had several good teachers, but if I were to identify 3 individuals who really inspired me and continue to inspire me a lot were Professor MP Singh, Professor Parmanand Singh, who is no longer there with us, and we pay tribute to him, and Professor B.B. Pandey. Right. All 3 were extraordinary individuals in their own right. They were great scholars, great researchers, great teachers, but more importantly, they were deeply connected to the students. That's something, and I think for somebody like me, it mattered so much because I could have easily got lost in the larger media of things in Delhi, and I think they helped me to think in terms of why the study of law is important, and also how to go about it. It's not so much about what they taught; it's also about what we saw in them, what we observed from their life, and how they mentored them without
Yes.
actually
Raj,
preaching to us.
Raj, this is something I know you mentioned about our professors, and they are still, of course, Professor Paman Singh is no more, but our other professors are working with you in some capacity. I saw it personally with our entire batch, that how you treat them with respect and with so much of gratitude, and they're still being part of the OP Jindal in some way. But it's not important that they are part of OP Jindal. More important thing is that they are still blessing us with
Correct.
whatever age they are in. They are still
Correct.
contributing. But
Correct.
what actually is very striking, and one of the purpose of this interview is that apart from teachers, you know what I today feel, that the younger generation, we are 20 years behind them. Younger generation needs to know that a person like you, who has disrupted this whole thing about education, was not confined to the law school or the teachers there. You had a wider range of teachers around you, whether it's a somebody in a social society, whether he was somebody in the government or in the judiciary. I saw your relationship with Justice Krishna here. I remember a particular event. I went with you at the airport. I was least interested to go with you. And you were adamant I must come with you. And you were telling me about Justice Krishna Iyer. Who is Justice Krishna Iyer? What is his contribution to the country? And how difficult it is for somebody, even I was fine with his studies and some kind of orientation in my life. Now, today's people, when they are so transactional, they sometimes talk about that life has to tell me, what do I get immediately? You were investing in things which were beyond campus. How much you think it is important to build your character, your life, and your career?
Oh, it's a fantastic question, Sudhir, and I think you said it right. We meet a lot of young people, both as students, young lawyers, and I must say, it's probably not so much about why they have become transactional, but probably they are not able to appreciate what a deeper sense of gratitude can do to themselves. It's not so much about what it is to the other. It's actually a innate, self-reflective, feeling that one goes through when one sees the lives of extraordinary people and engaging with them. And I must also tell you that I think we probably were the last generation which was able to appreciate tradition and modernity and strike a very important balance between the two. And I'm saying this because we have seen a lot of batches of students who have come through. If you remember, when we hosted the alumni meet of our batch, I think that type of connectedness that we had with teachers and other mentors, talking about people, talking about doing things that may not matter to you, various activities and initiatives that we promoted in the university. That was a generation which we didn't have a CV. I mean,
We didn't have a CV, Raj, we didn't have a CV. We had no organized internship. Now
exactly.
people write in their internship that, look, basically they talk like Sita ka Swayamvar. Like Sita Swayamvar, everybody who came, he said, "Main Rajaon ka Raja, main Shurveeron ka Shurveer." When
Yes.
internship applications come, they talk like that only.
Absolutely.
So that humbleness and the sense of humility has gone from our system.
I know, and I think we need to invest in this, because what has happened is that because of that approach, that people have begun to not value those individual experiences. And sometimes I sit in committees of scholarships, and people have 20 internships over a period of 5 years, sometimes 1 week and 2 weeks, because each of them are a bullet point in a CV. And I'm so I feel sorry for these people, because when we did what we did, it was such a transformative experience because we went so deep into it. And you remember the work that we did for the Wildlife Institute of India, the Sansar Chand case, or for that matter, the Rajaji National Park. project that I had worked on. Each of those things, there were far fewer in number, but they were so impactful and in many ways so deeply personally transformative. And I think this is what we need to do.
And also, they were not done because they were supposed to be part of some CV. They were done because there was some satisfaction derived out of it. At this stage, let me take you to your journey after Campus Law Center. You got Rhodes Scholarship after many, many years. I think after a decade, Campus Law Center got a Rhodes Scholar in 1997. You went as a Rhodes Scholar to Oxford. You further studied. You went and started working in a law firm. So the journey was very typical. It was almost predictable. You started working in a US law firm. It was a very respectable position for you. You leave that first disruption. You come to Hong Kong after that. You are still restless. You are teaching now. You're getting some satisfaction, but your heart is into something else. Now you have to tell us today, and this is something which is the reason for why we should do this kind of show, that what is settling in life is. If settling in life is having an apartment which has a very good balcony looking at 21st Avenue in New York, or having a bay-facing apartment in Hong Kong, or leaving it and coming back to Sonipat to fulfill and do something which justifies the bigger purpose of life. If this we can communicate to the people who are hearing this, why will you disrupt when you have a settled life? You have a settled job, you have a settled money. Why will you come and risk everything and convince a person and get that pressure on you that I will take this pressure of creating something, knowing you, kind of consciousness you, what makes you tick?
Thank you so much for that question. Listen, when I studied in Delhi University, that experience was very, I would say, very privileged for me, because for the first time I saw people across from India, and I also saw the power of education. What education in a nearly 100-year-old queen of Indian universities, which is what I always see the University of Delhi to be. It had so much of history and heritage and all of that. The Rhodes Scholarship was indeed a path-breaking experience for me to go to Oxford, which is the 800-year-old university. And let me tell you, what happened at Oxford was very important for me. One day, one of the masters, the master of my college, I was studying in a college called University College. It was founded in the year 1249. And we were celebrating our 750th anniversary when I was a student there. And Lord Butler was the master of my college. And he told me, whenever he spoke about the college, he would say, we are the oldest college in the English-speaking world. And once I asked him, so why would you always say this? And then he reminded me about something that I knew. He said, in your country, there were universities long before Oxford. And he talked about Nalanda, Takshashila, Vallabhi, and Vikramshila. The fact that India and Indian civilization over 2000 years ago, long before Bologna, which is a 1000-year-old university, long before Oxford and Cambridge, which are 800 years old, had institutions of global excellence, which could bring in faculty and students from across the world. Such was the Indian civilization's contribution to the world at large. So I was thinking, if we had at a point of time in history doing so much, what happened to both the pre-independent India and the post-independent India, which now we can say with confidence that there has been widespread deterioration in academic standards and our ability to build excellence. That was the time I decided that I want to be part of an effort to build a world-class university.
Okay,
this was 1998 and I was 24 years old.
And Raja, just tell me one thing here, and this is very important. When you come to India, you convince somebody, and that person gives you money, knowing you how conscious you are about spending anybody's money or not taking any obligation, having a character, taking somebody's money, starting a university in Sonipat. Somehow people will say it's a difficult state to be. Starting an educational university in Sonipat, let me put it more correctly, expecting foreign faculty to be a citizen of Sonipat, taking somebody's money. What was your confidence at that time? How did you have that confidence that you'll make it the #1 law school, so far the private schools are concerned, or the top 100 universities in the world? what made you so compelling about it?
Sudhir, after Oxford, I went to Harvard Law School. I did my master's in law there. That was a very important experience, and that's where I began to think big. Because one of the remarkable things about US and Harvard is the possibility to shaping the future of the world on a number of powerful ideas. I was thinking that how universities can play such a dominant role in the evolution of societies, including in science and technology, in medicine, in liberal arts, in humanities, social sciences, and law. And so that was the vision. And of course, the journey took me to New York and Hong Kong. I mean, before that, Japan, I taught in Tokyo, and then Hong Kong. By the time I had traveled around the world, looked at universities around the world, and I was convinced that India needs to have a truly global university and a world-class law school and other schools. This is when I got to meet with our benefactor, Mr. Jindal, Mr. Naveen Jindal, and he had, if you remember, he had already fought a very important case known as the Naveen Jindal versus Union of India, which led to the right to fly the national flag for private Indian citizens. Before that, it was part of a colonial legacy that the flying of the flag was confined to only government officials. Yeah. So I got to meet him, and as you rightly said, to be able to persuade him, because by the time in the year 2005, his father had died, and I met him in the year 2006, October, and essentially told him about the vision of creating a world-class university. I wanted it to be in Haryana as a tribute to his own family, where they are from Hisar. And the thing that I told him is, I wanted him to be the John Harvard of India, the LU Yale of India, the Jane and Lillian Stanford of India, to do what Ranran Shah and Li Ka-shing were doing in Singapore, Hong Kong, as well as in mainland China. With that vision, I had requested him to do three things. One, to make a substantial financial commitment. Second, to do it in a not-for-profit manner. And third, to let me have the academic freedom, autonomy, and independence to build a world-class university. And he committed to all of that. And I must tell you, Sudhir, he has kept his promise and actually fulfilled it in every sense.
At this stage, we are at the last final minutes. I'll ask you here three things. One is, somebody would be your mentor, somebody you'll be looking up to. Somebody is there, must be, who is inspiring. I know sometimes you talk about Swami Vivekananda, and I know your thought process, but who is your mentor?
So let me say this. I was hugely influenced by my parents. My father himself is a professor and somebody who I learned a lot in the early days of my own, evolution. But other than that, besides my teachers, the way I have constantly evolved is that I look up to a number of individuals who have mentored me at various points of time in my life. It could be people who I have looked up to in terms of their academic work. Also people, in fact, people like you and me at various points of time, we have got inspiration. Now, today I'm sitting in Sonipat, we are discussing this. I am hugely inspired by Sonipat. You know why? Because today is the Indian Olympic contingent has 31 athletes from Haryana. Can you believe it?
Amazing.
50% of the Indian Olympic contingent is from Punjab and Haryana, the smallest states of India. And I have even better news for you. 6 of them are from Sonipat. Can you believe it? 6 of them are from Sonipat, including the silver medal winner, Mr. Daya. So that is the power.
Then your foreign faculty would be WhatsApping to their people and families.
Exactly.
Extended families winning medals in
absolutely. So it is. So the way I see it is, we have made Sonipat the intellectual capital of the world. It is also now the sports capital of the world. It has this potential, and this is what is Sonipat and Haryana capable of doing.
At this stage, I'll ask you a few final questions. See, there is one side of you, people know that you are a focused person. You are a Sunil Gavaskar, as your colleagues talk to us about that you are very focused. But you have a very good work-life balance also. You are a person who became a vegetarian from being a non-vegetarian. You have a value system. You take care of your family. You give a lot of time to them. A lot of people ask us when we ask them to join our firm, they talk about one of the conditions is what is the work-life balance. Now, what is your definition of work-life balance? And how much How much love has a role to play in your life?
So I am very fortunate, Sudhir, that I met my wife Pratibha as a student in Delhi University, and she is a lawyer herself, and she is the real lawyer in the family. She's a very renowned corporate lawyer, and we were fortunate to be in the same class in both
I
Oxford and
hope
Harvard.
that like Shah Jahan, you have not created Jindal Law School as a tribute to her.
No, not at all. If at all anything, she stays away from it, and quite rightly so. But no, the thing is that I am very fortunate simply because, I mean, I must say that, in fact, the thing that I do feel occasionally guilty is that I have not been able to devote as much time that I should for both my kids and my family. But then she has let me do what I am doing, because right from the time when I didn't have a job in New York and she supported me financially, I was actually jobless between the time when I quit my law firm job and before I got any opportunity. So almost for 2 years or so, she was not only financially supporting me, but allowed me to pursue my dreams and aspirations. And all through the life of the next life of journey around Hong Kong and India, she supported this because, frankly speaking, there was a lot of risks, as you rightly said, associating with the idea of moving to India with the creation of something like this. But she supported it. And even now, she tells that I am her corporate social responsibility. So she lets me to do what I'm doing. And my kids have also understood that, because one of the differences between her and me is she can switch off from what she was doing much better than me. And I, unfortunately, don't switch off. This is a 24/7 activity. And because somehow this is not a job that we are pursuing, it's a calling in life.
And tell me the last word now to you, that as a 22-year-old, a 23-year-old who comes out of a law school or a business school or engineering school and who's living in today's country, what is your message to him? How they inspire themselves, how they make a career and fortune out of this country?
Yeah, well, the most important message I will give to all of them is try to be less selfish. Very important. It's important to look at how their lives can make an impact to the society at large. And I'm saying impact not just from the standpoint of doing charity. It's about looking at how their work and life can have a contribution that goes beyond. In fact, and that's because it is actually a privilege that many of us have for our education. I mean, UNESCO has estimated that from March 2020 to 2021 now, over 1.5 billion people have been come out of schools and colleges because they simply don't have an opportunity to learn, because online education is not a possibility. Even in India, for example, there is only 15% of Indian households have a reasonable access to electricity, reasonable access to Wi-Fi and an equipment. So in a way, what I want to say is that young people should appreciate the privilege that they have and to have that type of education, so that with all privilege comes responsibility, and they should make sure that whatever work that they do, they are keeping in mind that they have a larger social impact to that work.
Thank you, Professor C. Rajkumar, for being my first guest and inaugurating Sudhir Mishra Show. Many, many thanks to you.
Thank you very much, Sudhir, and such a pleasure for me to talk to you. And of course, thank you, Trust Legal, as well as Business World, for hosting this program.
Thanks a lot, Rajkumar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.